Welcome back to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader, and we've got a pretty decent assortment for vintage Star Wars items. I almost said Kenner, but we've got a couple of data points for some Takara Japanese items that I wanted to go through. So mint on cards, some loose graded, some loose complete, things like that. Pretty wide assortment here. And for a few of these, I did pick up some past sales over at Hake's auctions, just so we can compare and contrast and speculate as results, you know, the results on eBay versus the Hake's auctions that have sold in the past. And that's something I encourage you guys to do as you're looking at some of these rare items, that just for giggles, look at the closed auctions on Hake's to see how the price compares that you're willing to pay or that you're bidding on something if it's an auction. Or in this case, this was a 12-back C Takara sticker, so the Takara import sticker on it. But this one had the rare white background on the card back. So the only thing that would be even more rare is if it had the Takara Japanese sculpt for the figure inside. This one I don't think is. I think this is just a Hong Kong figure, but it's a very specific face sculpt that's a little different. This one looks just like a standard Hong Kong inside, but you know, again, I could be mistaken there. It's just really hard to tell based on these limited photos. But this one was an AFA 80, unpunched, no price sticker, archival case with the white background and the Takara import sticker. Now, it was listed for $6,600, which seems like a ridiculous price. The accepted offer was $5,675. Now, the only reason that I think that it is the Takara sculpt inside is based on that sales price versus what was on Hake's. So this one had the Takara sticker and the white background. It was also an AFA 80. Now, this one closed like 6 years ago, and it sold for $24.66 versus, again, this one that sold for $56.75. But looking at the figure, it looks like the same figure to me. I mean, I don't see any major differences. It's got the same paint apps on it. So now here was another one that was an AFA 85, and this one sold in March of 2022, but it's a higher grade. It was punched versus unpunched, but it was a higher grade, AFA 85, and that one sold at an auction on Hake's for $32.45. Again, this one that just sold on eBay was $56.75. And then the last one I had was the Takara sculpt. Now, this one was labeled as such, okay? It says white background Takara sculpt. I personally think that this is what the label would say, unless they started changing it up. So now this is the one that sold for $64.90. $64.90. And again, this was, you know, labeled Takara sculpt. So it's not the same one that sold on eBay, because this one does not have that. So it's a little difficult to say. Now, for me, if it's $56.75, and again, this one sold that was the same grade at $64.90, you would say, okay, that's a good deal. But I just don't know for a fact. And looking at it, I mean, this is the Takara sculpt, right? It looks exactly the same as all these others. I mean, to me, it's just really tough to tell the difference looking at the two of these. You know, the chest apparatus looks like pretty much the same. I mean, it's very minimal difference. But again, it's a Japanese COO, Takara COO, versus a Hong Kong COO. I just don't know enough about the Takara sculpt relative to the Hong Kong to be able to make an educated guess. I mean, it's just so difficult to tell. And there's different lighting, and you know, the photos were taken at different times. I mean, who knows? But anyway, it's just a thing to speculate on for those of you that are Vader experts and can tell the difference, and can tell if this one is a Vader sculpt or a Hong Kong sculpt or a Takara sculpt. That would basically explain a lot of things. But you know, just looking at this label, it makes you think, okay, it's not, since it doesn't say Takara sculpt on there. But you know, we all know that AFA changes their labels quite a bit. All right, you know, you can have the exact same thing graded 4 years ago, and then now it would be graded differently or labeled differently on the AFA label. So Another one is Ben Kenobi 12 back A with the white hair, AFA 80. That sold for $3,500. And the interesting thing is on Hakes, every 12 back A, either with or without the SKU on the footer stand, every one of them that sold on Hakes was a gray-haired. The only 12 back A with the white hair that I could find was a CAS 85. It was a punched example, just like this one. And this one sold in November of 2023 for $1,957. Now, again, this was an AFA 80 and sold for $3,500 in a buy it now situation. So the white-haired Ben Kenobi on a 12A is tough to find, apparently, because they're almost all gray-haired. Just an interesting. Now, this one was also an SKU on the footer stand, too. This one that sold was not labeled as such. I don't see an SKU on the footer stand, but I think it would have been labeled as such by AFA had it been. So very unique item. You just don't see those very often with or without the SKU on the footer. A lot of them are gray-haired. Some other items. Brian's Toys had a 12-back B Sand People graded AFA 80+. This was a punched example. The best offer accepted was $1,360. Again, that was an AFA 80+. And then Brian's Toys also had a 12-back B Sand People graded AFA 80 a while back that sold at $1,575. So if you're looking for one in particular, I got two data points for you. This AFA 80+ that sold for $1,360, and then an AFA 80 that sold at $1,575. So pretty tight price range there, depending on the grade and time frame and things like that. Brian's Toys also had this 12-back B C3PO AFA 80 unpunched no price sticker that sold at $2,000. I think that's personally a little high. I think in the auction it does not approach $1,600. Maybe I'm wrong on that. AFA 80 12B C3PO is pretty easy to find, I feel like. And $1,500, $1,600, maybe $1,700, but I don't see $2,000. I just think that's too high. Next up was an ungraded Luke Farm Boy 12 back. Now this one had some yellowing to the blister, so not perfect. Probably 75 grade shape plus yellowed to the blister. That sold for $1,300. That's a budget friendly example. Some other relatively budget friendly examples. We got a 20 back A Chewbacca that was graded AFA 75 punched example with a Toy City price sticker. $1,750. Again, most of the buy it nows, they're going to be too high. I mean, unless the seller misprices them, I just think in general they're going to be a little bit higher than where they'd really go for in an auction, but that's kind of self-explanatory. Likewise, a 75 grade 20 back A Jawa sold for $975. That's probably fairly close, actually. That seems to be pretty close for a Jawa. Now, this one did have a big ding at the top of the blister, which, you're looking at the subgrades here, was 85, 85, and then 75 for the blister. So that blister ding was enough to bring the overall down to a 75, even though it had 285 subscores. But, I mean, 975 to me you're going on someone that doesn't buy early card backs or did not buy many early card backs when I was still buying them. But that feels like a fairly reasonable price relative to maybe some of these others that we looked at. Another interesting one where we're going to pull up the Hakes data is the 8-inch line from Takara, the Japanese 8-inch line. This one had the blister support for the C3PO, and it was an AFA 75. And I don't know why they went so odd with the label there, but 70, 75, 90 were the subscores on that one. And this one does not have the Tomb Trooper or whatever it was label. There's an error for this particular figure where it's got a Tomb Trooper label on there for the Stormtrooper. So this one had the archival case, and he probably did what I would do if I had one of these and I was submitting it for grading. I would add the blister support. These blisters are super, super fragile. But that was an interesting sale that was down in Australia, and it closed at 1,075 Australian dollars, which is 700 US. And then the only data points I could find were interesting ones. This was a 60 grade, and now this one had the Stoom Trooper. Stoom Trooper is how they call it. This is an error that appeared on some of them. And it's a 7-inch, not 8-inch. I said 8-inch line. Just like everything that I say is 8 inches, I exaggerate. You see what I did there? Really bad. But the 7-inch C3PO, more like 4.5 inches, if we're being honest, The 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 C3PO was a 60 grade, but it had the air, and that one sold for $11.40. Now again, this one just closed. It was a 75 grade, and it sold for $700. So that's a pretty significant price difference. And again, that one was back in July of 2022. And then we had this AFA 85 that just closed a year ago, July 31st, 2024. That one sold for $15.57. Now, again, that's an 85 grade, which is the upper tier for these items. These are very tough to find in high grade, very tough to find. But this is feeling like a pretty decent deal at $700 relative to what this one sold for. Again, it was an AFA 85 at $15.57. And I think that was really the one that was primarily used for pricing. If I was the buyer here, is it worth half that at a 75 grade? Probably. Anyway, interesting. Next up was the chocolate brown haired Hong Kong farm boy that Treasures from the Attic had. That one did sell at 350 pounds. It was only a UKG 80, which you could make an argument that was a little generous. Someone was saying in the comments that they get pretty generous grading, maybe because they have high volume. But those eyebrows were pretty bad rubs there. But otherwise, I thought it was a pretty clean figure. So I don't know. I think I'd personally, if I had this in hand, the eyebrows, is it enough to really bring it down to a 75? I don't know. I'd probably give it an 80 personally. But that one did sell at 350 pounds, which is 464 US dollars. We had this Luke Jedi baggie, which they are surprisingly tough to find in decent high grade. This is a UKG 90 with the kind of upgraded case style. And that one sold for 250 pounds, which is $331. That's a pretty decent deal there. This was a beefy overpay. Beefy. This one was the brown snake, dark green skin Yoda AFA 85. Someone paid $550 for that. $550. Way too high. Way too high. I think at an auction, this goes like maybe $350. Maybe. I mean, that's pushing it. It's got the black Pac-Man eyes, the brown snake. Very nice figure. I'm not trying to disparage it. But is it $550? No, I don't think it is at all. Here was another one from Rad Vintage Toys. Nick had this one for sale. This was an AFA 80 Luke Ben R2D2 C3PO department store 4-pack. That's kind of a rarity. That was a rarity. That one did sell in a buy it now for $4K. And that feels like it's probably from the last Hake's auction. I didn't look it up to see. That could have been a flip from the last Hake's auction, but that was a pretty cool item though. AFA 80 department store 4-pack. It did sell at $4,000. Now we've got to talk about these. I'm sorry to kind of harp on these two, but I got to talk about them because I sent these out to my Patreons, and now I thought it was for an actual 3-pack, a complete 3-pack, and it was Admiral Akbar, General Madine, Rebel Commando department store 3-pack, but this one was just for the box, 3-pack box. And what's interesting is that they had an 8-pack also at auction around the same time. This collectible is the original box packaging. So it's just the box for this one. So it's kind of a sneaky way to advertise it. I thought it was kind of disingenuous. But they had another one that was an 8-pack. Now this one sold for $401.98. And it had slightly different wording. It says, this original action figure set features characters from, and this collectible is the original box packaging. So I don't know if it's just for the box or if it included all the items. They look like they're factory sealed. Someone was saying that it's kind of, it's been opened. You can see there, the tape's starting to peel up there. At certain angles, it looks factory sealed to me, but right there, it looks like it's maybe not. So I don't know if it's just for the box or if it's just, or if it included the items. I'm guessing that this one's definitely not factory sealed. You can see it's been open there, but I don't know. Come on, man. Be honest with your advertising. Don't try to be so vague with it that people overbid for it. So I just found that to be kind of scummy. Again, maybe it's because I'm misreading it. But I just feel like you should say this is for the box only, or this includes everything. Given that they didn't show the figures, I'm assuming it was just the boxes that it sold for. Now, This one I could see being $400 just for the box. It feels like a rarity to me, an 8-pack. I've never particularly seen this 8-pack. Now you can see who it's supposedly was included. We got R2-D2 sensor scope. We got Luke, Hoth, and Vader, ERG, Squiddy, Bib, Gammy, and then Chief Chirpa. And then the squid head and the Bib Fortuna, they were kind of prototype looking on the photos there. It's got the red cape and the red robe. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. You got to be really careful. I didn't even notice that, but Ellen Doyle, a channel supporter, noticed that, and I just found that to be kind of, it left a bad taste in my mouth. That's what she said. Next up, we've got a 77 back A Yoda graded AFA 80 unpunched clear blister as well. This one was a beauty. Now, would I have paid $1,500 for it? Probably not in the current market environment. We've seen a few here recently in this grade, maybe punched versus unpunched, but clear blister, go in that 11 to 1200 range. That would be the number that I would be comfortable paying right now. This one was also the Hong Kong. It was not the made in Mexico. That's the first thing I always check when I see a Return of the Jedi clear blister. I didn't think it was, just based on the figure inside. It doesn't have that bright green kind of look to it that the Letty does. But anyway, that one sold at $1,500. That's a little higher than I'd pay personally, but it's not too far off. You know, it's probably $200 or $300 too high in my opinion. This was a pretty nice looking ERG 65C. That one sold for $356. Big number, but it's clear to clear-ish blister, unpunched, and that one was a beauty. It sold for big numbers. And I've got a few loose complete figures here. We've got an Amanaman that sold at $265. We've got the A-Wing palette at $355 that included the coin and card back. And then the Imperial Gunner included the coin. That one sold for $371. And then this one was, I actually thought, a pretty good deal. This was an uncirculated 90 Ewoks version, the cartoon Ewoks version of Wicket. And it sold in a buy it now or make an offer for $475. Now, we just had recently on this video a loose complete example, ungraded, that sold for $330. Here, you're getting an uncirculated 90 grade, admittedly old case, but good candidate to send in for recasing. And to me, that's got to be one of the highest graded on the population report for not much more. Now, let's call it $150 more than what a loose complete example goes for ungraded. So great buy, whoever got that one for $475. That's it for this video. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll be back soon.